All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If I could have our student reps lead us. Roll call, please, Linda.
Kristen Cambenzi,
Here.
Glenn Sarka,
Here.
James Hewitt,
Here.
Jennifer Cliff,
Here.
Jennifer Ray,
Here.
Cheryl Maddox-Smith,
Here.
Jason Zajunik,
Here.
Okay, and I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Support.
All right, motion made by Ms. Ray, support by Mr. Hewitt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Cambenzi. Welcome, everyone. Had a few items on my superintendent report, but none of them really you're not gonna hear much from me on any of those items. We have some guest speakers who bring more expertise on all of the agenda items under the superintendent report. So we're gonna start with Steve Betcher from IDI, who's gonna talk about the MSHS boiler burner replacement. Mr. Betcher?
We took and received bids from two contractors. We put them up publicly for the boiler, the burner on the boiler, replacing just simply the burner. When we were approached about what to do with the heating system, we first looked at what it would take to replace one of the old boilers. The boilers in this school are well over 50 years old, and they've had a lot of life to them. However, they have been rebuilt and retubed as of recent, and the main boiler body is in good shape. So we had recommended to the school, instead of spending $700,000 to replace a boiler, we looked at putting just a new burner, a modulated electronic burner on the front of the boiler, which is going to save the school probably at least 15% in energy costs per year, and also be able to be put on a new boiler should down the road these fail. So you don't have to just junk them at a later date. The estimated cost for this work that I had quoted back in end of July, early August in some emails when we first looked at it was $100,000. The work is a specialty type work in that you need somebody that can potentially weld on a boiler, so it's a special license, and not everybody can do that. When we put it out to bid, we got two bids. One was from Prime Specialty Contracting, and I think you all have a letter in your board packet, for $99,760. So that was right in about what we said at $100,000. I thought maybe a little bit more than that. Tweet Garrett Mechanical out of the Fox Valley was at $110,000. I'm recommending, after talking to Prime Specialty Contractor and Corey Bouchon, the owner, they're very familiar with it. They had looked at it extensively. They had talked to the rep. They're using the parts and pieces that we had specified in the bid specs. There's no substitutions, and they have everything included in their bid that we can tell. So I'm recommending to the school district that they award the work to Prime Specialty Contracting for that $99,760. And I'll take any questions if anybody has any.
This could be a question for you or for Mr. Lampman too, but you mentioned the 15% annual energy cost savings. Do you know what that equates to?
I do not know the total energy bill currently of this school. I know, energy costs have gone up in the last 5 or 6 years, so I don't know if you...
I don't have that number tonight. We can certainly try to quantify that for you and bring that to you at a later date.
I'd like to know that, what we spent last year, just on that alone. I think that would be interesting to see what that might potentially be and if it actually ends up being that kind of savings.
Yeah, and we'd have to, I don't believe the boilers are broken down on their own energy bill per se. I'd have to look down at the details a little bit more
That is true. The heating system and the pool heating boilers are on the same gas meter. There are 2 gas meters here, but those are on the same gas meter, so that would have to be estimated or, assumed.
For this type of a project, what's the estimated time frame that it will be a viable heating opportunity for the school?
When you say-
By replacing the module versus completely replacing the boilers, how long will this prolong the heating system?
The boiler, the actual boiler itself, and if you understand a boiler and burner system, a burner is just the part that fits on a combustion chamber, a big steel combustion chamber, and it mixes fuel and air together and shoots the flames into the boiler. The boiler itself, like I said, had been retubed. The shell of the boiler, the front door gets replaced as part of this project because that has a lot of wear to it. The back portion of the boiler looks to be in good shape. From just a physical look, I would think you can go at least another 10 years plus. But, it could be 20, it could be 5. I can't tell you exactly. But like I said, what we did do is we tried to specify parts that if this should ever happen where the boiler goes down and you have to replace these steam boilers, you can take that same burner and put it on a boiler of equivalent size in the future. You're not having to literally throw this away.
Mr. Betcher, did I understand it correctly that you would actually have to take the roof off of that one section of the basement in order to take the actual steam, the boiler, the body of
Yes.
it out?
Yeah, these boilers weigh, and I can't remember, but it's in the tens of thousands, close to 100,000 pounds, 50 tons, whatever. To pull one of these boilers out, you have to literally take the roof off, cut a whole section, get a crane in, do a lift right out of the school and put a new one in. So that's where the cost really gets expensive. The boiler itself is probably $200,000, but to complete the project would probably be about $700,000.
We've got a fancy elevator that we're told can handle that, so.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It's in a different building,
The boiler's
so
almost
maybe-
as long as from this table right here, so.
Is there going to be much of an interruption, or how long would it take to perform this work? Is it going to get in the way of any?
It's going to take about 1 month, according to Prime, 4 weeks. We purposely, talking to school maintenance right now, they've got both boilers up and running. Knock on wood, let's hope, they continue, the burners continue to operate. The parts are getting harder to get. Should one go down, we can always, if they have the parts in hand, which they're thinking they'll have them somewhere in January, late January, they could do the work. As long as both boilers are running, we're not going to take the chance and shut one down. We want to keep them both running. And then potentially after we get through the peak of the heating season, into March, 1st of April, do the work at that point. That's why we got the bids in as soon as we could, tried to move it forward and get the parts here, because if it does, they can start working on it. You got 2 operable boilers right now, but yeah, you're on borrowed time with them both. And we talked a little bit about that as well, is to get one up and running. In really cold weather, you need 2 boilers, not just one. So you may want to consider in the future the second one.
In Prime's quote for labor estimates are factored in that it could be 6 months out from now?
That is. Yep, they fully understand when to do it. In fact, they prefer as well to do it after the prime heating season. It keeps the pressure off of them.
All set? All right, well, thank you so much,
Good.
Mr. Betcher. And then next up, I have another guest, Mr. Eric Smith, who comes to us from Northern Michigan University and has recently retired, but sure doesn't seem like he's retired based on how much he's working, at least from what I can tell. So he has graciously offered his services and expertise to us and offered to come here tonight and explain this project. The radio upgrade project, I will say, is one that I feel really strongly about. It has many implications, not only to improve our communication between buses, between buildings, or within buildings and between buses, but also as a district as a whole, particularly in light of safety, better communications, and the safety in regards to safety. So, Mr. Smith.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and just share with you a little bit of the thought process going into the two-way radio communications project. Like many projects, it started with just a single purpose. We wanted to fix the radios in the buses because right now the buses can't talk to each other when they get to be at great distances. But as happens with projects, there were other things that we began to talk about as well. The district has a number of portable radios that they use in their buildings, and the channel assignments in those are not what they should be, so we wanted to address that. We had lots of discussion about emergency communications, and I know as a board that's been something that you've been looking at as well, but that's something that we're going to address with this project. We want to minimize costs, of course, but at the same time expand the opportunities that staff have to use radio services. So that's a piece of this project. We'd like to preserve the investment that MAPS has in its analog radio system with over 200 radios, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. That represents a sizable investment, and we can reuse many of those radios. We're also looking at adding smartphone technology to the radio service, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And finally, we need to comply with FCC rules and regulations because the frequencies that MAPS uses for its radio services are controlled by the FCC, and the district actually has licenses that need to be paid attention to. So how do we do all this? Well, there are a number of things that we wanted to focus on. First and foremost, we want to replace the point-to-point radio communications with a digital repeater service, and I'll get into that here in just a moment. We want to add handheld radios that can bridge the existing handhelds and the new digital repeater system. We want to be able to use our existing FCC licenses so that we can create a unified frequency plan for the district. We want to add a gateway technology service, and I'll talk more about this, that will enable cell phone interoperability. And then finally, we're going to need to do some recoordination with the FCC to make the licenses adequate for digital service. So before we get into that, I wanted just to back up for a moment and talk a little bit about how the service currently works. A portable radio, an analog radio that the district has now, can talk to one of the buses as long as that bus is fairly close to the portable radio. Or the buses can talk to each other, again, as long as they're fairly close to each other. But what happens is as they get further apart, terrain becomes an issue and it blocks the communication path. So an analog radio working point to point won't work anymore if the distance is too great or if there's an obstacle in the way. So the answer to that is to install a repeater. And a repeater is nothing more than another radio service that takes an incoming signal and then rebroadcasts it on a different frequency so that receiving radios can hear what's being said. And the repeater system that we're talking about is one that we would enable through a service provided by Northern Michigan University. You can see the tower site that we're looking at is located on Mount Menard. It's NMU's tower. It's a 100-foot stick that has a number of critical services, has fiber capability so that we can have internet service up there, standby power for those times when Marquette just loses power due to weather conditions, and it also has climate-controlled shelters, which are important to keep the equipment secure and operating. But if you look at the map on the right, you'll see that the projected coverage for this particular site is actually very good. Right in the city of Marquette, we have almost uniform coverage. And then moving off to the east over by the Munising area, we still maintain excellent coverage. Up north toward the Big Bay area, we still have coverage, and down south toward Rapid River, coverage again. As we begin to work our way west, that coverage starts to fall off just after you pass Ishpeming and Negaunee, and that's primarily because of the higher terrain there. But that's not so much of an issue as we'll talk about in a minute once we talk about the gateway technology. So what is a gateway and how does it work? We've talked a little bit about the repeater interface and how that would function. At the repeater site, if we add a gateway service, we can connect that to the internet, And then that internet connection connects to a cellular network, which enables iPhones and Android devices on the network. In order for those devices to access the repeater, there are two things that are required. One, they have to have the appropriate app, and two, they have to be authorized. So not anybody can get on that network. It's controlled and it's secure, but it does provide that interoperability that allows cell phones now to become a part of the new radio network. I also want to talk, when we deal with interoperability, about our individual school buildings. Right now, the yellow radios that are centered around each building are used really quite successfully to talk with various staff members in a building. For example, a principal might be able to talk to an aide, or a teacher on a playground who has an emergency might be able to call for assistance. Those are the things that these analog radios are used for. And there are over 200 of them in the district, and you can see that the value of those is significant, over $60,000. So what we're talking about as part of this plan is keeping the analog radios, but adding other radios that allow us to make it interoperable with the new digital repeater system. The orange radios that are shown now on the diagram are configured with multiple channels. So the repeater would have two channels, one that would communicate with buses, a second one that would be earmarked for digital use, and then they would also have a third channel that would be specific to the building where they're located. So, for example, in the event of an emergency, if Mr. Sedgwick needed to communicate with all of his building administrators, he would get on the emergency channel, be able to communicate with everybody all at once, and then they in turn could switch to their own local building channel and talk to individual radios at the school, sharing whatever information was appropriate. One of the things that we talked about with your school resource officers was the flow of communication, and we actually spent quite a bit of time talking about not only technically how the system would work, but also operationally, what does it need to be able to do. And the problem that you can have often with radios, if everybody has access to everything, is information overload. So what this particular scheme does is allow us to control the flow of information, get the critical data or information to the people who need it, and they in turn can communicate that with staffs as appropriate. So we think that from the school resource officer's position, the MAPS administration's position, this offers the best opportunity to get the information where it's needed, when it's needed. So there are actually 8 recommendations that we have, and I'll just briefly go through those. We want to update the existing MAPS licenses so that they can operate on a repeater. We want to purchase and install a 2-channel digital repeater system. We want to replace the 22 analog bus radios with new digital equipment. And we want to purchase 30 additional portable analog radios that will be useful not only in the schools, but also on the repeater network. And then coupled with that, we want to add the Gateway system for the mobile phone capability, reprogram the 200-plus analog radios so that we have channel consistency throughout the district, provide our school resource officers with repeater access to make sure they have effective communications. And then we also want to prepare a district-wide communications plan that provides employee training as needed so that everybody knows how to use the system. So in summary, we're going to be able to do a number of things. We preserve the 200 analog radios. We provide clear communications with our new digital repeater. We provide reliable communications with all the buildings, buses, and locations throughout the district. We allow for a migration to an all-digital service as analog radios reach their end of life. We provide cell phone access to the repeaters based on need, gateway access for future integration, and this is kind of an exciting feature. Services like the RAVE app and the Avigilon cameras that the district is already invested in, those become interoperable with a new digital repeater as the need dictates. We also provide that second radio channel for district-wide emergency use, and then we're doing all of this by leveraging the district's NMU agreement with NMU to gain access to the repeater space at the top of Mount Menard. So that's a quick overview of the project. I know there was a lot there, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Eric, just real quick, could you allude to the bid summary that we included in the packet? Do you have that information in front of you?
I don't have it in front of me here. So we did put the project out for bid request. We received 2 responses, one from Elcom Systems for a total of $53,366.33. The response from Range indicated that they wished not to bid. So the recommendation is, based on a review of the equipment that Elcom is providing, their history in providing local telecommunication services, that the award go to Elcom Systems. Any questions?
Have we seen staff using their own personal cell phones for things that they used to use the radio system for?
It's possible, but that I think would be an administration decision, and I would let Mr. Sedgwick address that question.
Can you clarify staff using their cell phones for something normally they'd use radios for?
Well, the example was given a principal wants to reach out to somebody in the building and might use their radio in that circumstance. And I would imagine a lot of staff would just say, well, I'll just text them, right? I can.
Yeah, I think that has happened, and it'll continue to be an option going forward. Like he was talking about, the analog radios, the internal systems in the building are going to remain intact, so they'll still have either option. But yes, we use our cell phones. Administrators use our cell phones a lot. And the beauty of my cell phone is, even if I'm out of town, I would add the app that Mr. Smith alluded to, so I theoretically could access the network from wherever I am in the country and be able to still help mitigate in an emergency.
And are you going to want people to kind of go back to using the radios? Is there an advantage to using the radios more? Or where they could use their own cell phones, is that?
Well, I think there is an advantage with using a radio at a very practical level. Let me just give you an example. We had a situation in one of our buildings recently. It turned out to be a false alarm, but it did require immediate action. I'm driving out to a building and thinking about the 15 different people that I need to communicate with. Not only can I not use my cell phone because I'm driving, but I can't communicate with 15 different people or make 15 different phone calls while also trying to deal with the immediate situation. So with the radio, I have that with me. I just jump on the emergency channel. Now all the people that are on a need-to-know basis are all hearing the same message from me, and I can communicate with all of them individually or at once. We don't want everybody to hear that information, but the people that are on a need-to-know basis would all hear it at the same time. I think it would greatly improve our efficiency. The cell phones have the technology of the cell phone really allows me to better communicate even more broadly than the radios. Like families, like my snow day message, I can do that in any school event. Could tell families what's going on. We actually practiced that with the district-wide drill for the first time last year. That's just one of many capabilities of the cell phone. So yes, both.
And it might be good to get people back to using the radio when radio is appropriate or more effective.
Right. I think it'll give our radio system is antiquated, as Mr. Smith has alluded to, and I think it's caused us to have to use our cell phones more than we would normally in situations where it's just not efficient or necessarily safe to use our cell phone.
Mr. Sedgwick, where's my guy? See how close it is? Great.
Yeah, oh, I see.
I appreciate it.
Good job.
Thank you. I'm assuming, though, that there's certainly going to be times, no, let me rephrase that. It sounds like the radios that we're looking at are really for emergent situations or for quick communication between administrator where it may not be prudent for the entire staff to be aware of certain situations. Am I understanding that correctly? Because I'm thinking in my own case, I use my cell phone between the teachers I work with all the time, and I can't imagine that we're wanting people on the radio saying, hey, Billy needs a little extra support in math. I'm sending him down there, so it's still going to be a both.
Yeah, those internal networks are already something we protect. This is at a whole nother level. I will add the communication with the buses is something that's also greatly enhanced. Right now, we're literally, we're relaying messages between multiple buses in order to get them to the person who might be on the outskirts of Marquette County, and that's just not effective. So, and that would be a situation where obviously you don't want to be texting. So, but your internal staff are going to use a lot of the same systems they've used forever. I don't think this would necessarily impact that.
If I could just add, assume a bus is taking a group of students to a location that's outside the district, and they go beyond the repeater location so that they're no longer within that coverage pattern that we showed you. If they have a cell phone, and it could be one provided by the district that has only that app on it, and they're able to get onto a cellular network, now they still maintain communication through the bus system. The transportation office has indicated there are times when they may not be in the building, but yet they still need to talk to buses after hours. And this would give them the option, using a cell phone, to still get on the network and talk to the buses as needed.
So all that for what seems to be pretty reasonable price. Any other questions for Mr. Smith? Thank you very much for all of your help, and that's been extensive. So I'm going to turn the superintendent report over to Mr. Lampman. I think he has the rest of the items listed.
Thank you, Mr. Sedgwick. Next up on the agenda is the audit report. As the board may recall, we joined this year with Market Alger Risa in a consortium bid for our audit services. Anderson Tackman and Company was the audit firm awarded the bid for Market Alger, all the districts in Market Alger Risa that were part of the consortium. So here tonight is Mike Grench from Anderson Tackman. Mike, if you'd like to take the podium to present the 22-23 audit report.
Everybody's favorite time of year, audit report time. My understanding is you've already had a pretty in-depth review of it, so I'm here more for questions in a way. I'll give you a very short synopsis, and then if there's questions, we can go from there. Looking at the audit report, starting on page 4 is the opinion. You had an unmodified opinion. You complied with all the generally accepted accounting principles. It says they're your statements, not ours, and we take a sampling of transactions. We don't look at every single transaction. With that, I think I'm going to look at page 21. Just looking at your funds, rolling them all up, you had a gain of about $5.2 million in the current year. 1.6 is coming from the general fund, and then 3.6 is from all your other funds. I'm sure Jim kind of went over that, so I'm going to kind of skip over that a little bit, other than saying, considering the financial situation with COVID and everything else that's gone on in the last few years, it's really nice to see that money being added to the bottom line. However, looking forward, as the COVID dollars start drying up, how is that going to affect your budgets going forward? That's where you can kind of look at, on page 69, 3.1 million got added to the capital project fund for future projects, which is always good to see, because that's a big expense that is hard to get funding for. The state's kind of paying you for the operational stuff, but what about building repairs and all the other items? So that's where that capital project and sinking fund money comes in nice. But one of the things to kind of keep in mind is, if I kind of look at page 78, you got just under $3 million in ESSER and GEAR money from the state, and that's all COVID-related money. So kind of looking at how did you spend that money? Was it one-time spending items, or was it items that you've added that are going to have a reoccurring cost going forward, and how are you going to support those going forward? And I think you've done a good job of managing that money, looking at that going forward. That's always good to see. The single audit we had, that's where we kind of look at compliance testing on certain grants. We did have 2 findings this year. The first one was I'm looking at page 82 and 83. Non-contract special pay items. With the turnover in staff, some of the documentation to support it wasn't there. Not saying you did it wrong, the support showing that that's how you did it wasn't there. And then looking at the other one is tracking employee grant-related activities. There again, with all the turnover you've had in the last 2 years, they're saying, well, here's all the documentation we want to see upon that. And with all the turnover, some of that documentation wasn't put together. I think Jim has a pretty good methodology of getting that back under control, so I'm not concerned. Are these big findings in my mind? No, it's more of all the documentation wasn't there, but it's not a case where you spent the money incorrectly. If you spend it incorrectly, then we'd be having a different discussion, but this is more of a documentation issue in that regard. And part of the problem too, especially with this one, is the ESSER funding. There's all the different waves of ESSER funding and what could you do with which one, and what you had to present with each of those changed every time you turned around. It was like 1 minute, oh, this is what we want to see, and then they changed the rules after you implemented something and wanted to see something different. So I don't think either of these are going to be issues going forward with the district. So I'm happy to say that. Other than that, we didn't have any other findings. So that's always good to see. That's the short version. Does the board have any other questions? We can go as deep as you want. I have all night. Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Grens. I appreciate you coming this evening to offer your opinion to the board in relation to our 22-23 audit report. And we did have a pretty in-depth discussion at the committee of the whole meeting. So I kind of feel like the board had already heard the messaging. So I'm not surprised there aren't a lot of questions this evening. But one last call. Hearing none.
There we go. Short and sweet.
And I just want to interject before he gets into merit pay. Our 3 guest speakers, by all means, if you want to bail, I like to give you that opportunity before we get into other business.
So the next item under the superintendent's report is annual merit pay. This is paid to our principals and our teaching staff based off of specific performance objectives on whether they are determined to be highly effective or effective. This is also based off the previous year's ratings. So customarily, this is paid out the first pay in December. So we'd be paying this based off the ratings for the 22-23 fiscal year. We had budgeted a 5% increase in merit pay which would have equated for a highly effective teacher to be $152.25. We rounded that up to $153 for a nice round number, which puts it closer to 5.5%. Staff that are just effective get half of the amount that a highly effective teacher or principal would receive. So this is our recommendation that a staff member that would be highly effective would receive $153. An effective performance would garner $76.50. In the past, we've offered time off, but since COVID, we have not had that as an option due to staff shortages, the availability of substitutes, things of that nature. So once again, we didn't offer a time off option. So I'd be looking for, I believe it's under new business later in the meeting for board action. But if there are any questions, hearing none.
Thank you, Mr. Lampman. That's all we have for the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the regular board meeting of October 16th, 2023, the personnel report dated November 2023, and the finance reports of October 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
All right, motion made by Mr. Zedunick, support by Mr. Hewitt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to board committee reports. We had our committee of the whole meeting on November 6, 2023. We discussed the audit report, and we also discussed pay-to-play, student admissions, and also rebranding. So we already heard about the audit report. We did discuss the pay-to-play and to see if there was any options that might be available to lessen the burden for families with pay-to-play, and perhaps instituting a scholarship for extracurriculars. I believe that is something that we're still discussing and getting ideas for. That one probably won't be a super easy solution, so we'll continue to discuss that probably at our next committee of the whole meeting. We did talk about student admissions and allowing all students to get in for free at our sporting events, school-sponsored sporting events. And I believe that is coming a little bit later. Yeah, a little bit later in the agenda. And we also talked about the rebranding process. The online Survey Monkey option ended last Friday, the 17th, and we had over 1,800 submissions for our nickname search. So we're just in the process of trying to go through some of those and figure out where we go from here. But that was kind of good to see that we had so many submissions and interest in our rebranding and picking of a new nickname. So does anyone have anything to add from the committee of the whole? Okay. Then we'll move on to the student school board representatives report.
So in student council recently, we've been beginning to plan our winter assembly along with doing the Toys for Tots fundraiser.
And the senior reps are planning our holiday dance, which will be on December 9th.
Thank you for that. All right, moving on to comments from the public, agenda items only. We will start with Lily Eberhard.
Hello, my name is Lily Eberhard. I am the Vice President of the MSHS student body. To fulfill this position, it's my job to speak out on something I believe could benefit my classmates in a positive manner. So I believe that students should have free admission to sporting events. I believe it would raise Marquette pride and spirit for not just students, but for our community. I think anyone could agree that when there are more students at these events, the atmosphere is like no other, for players and for the audience. I've had countless conversations with my peers regarding the question, are you going to the basketball game tonight? The response as answered most frequently is no, I don't want to pay the $5 to get in. Therefore, they do not attend and simply miss out on the opportunity to express school spirit, socialize with peers, and make memories. Speaking for myself, as well as others, the days that there are sporting events, you have an increase of happiness no matter how big or how small it is. You have something to look forward to. Sporting events is an opportunity for all students to come together to a safe environment and to have fun. There's something every student should get to experience throughout their high school years. As a community, this is what you should want for your local high school, for us to make memories and to simply build pride for our school. By eliminating school admission fees, you would see an overall increase of student happiness, spirit, and pride. Thank you.
Thank you. Nate Wood? No? Good. Okay. Cullen Pappen?
Hello, my name is Cully Papin, and first off, I'd like to thank you guys for your time with such a busy agenda tonight. And I'm the president of the MSHS Student Council, and I'm here today along with other Student Council representatives to speak out on behalf of the Student Council and the student body as a whole in support of creating free sporting events for all MAP students. Numerous students have reached out to me in regards to making admission free for all MAP sporting events. Students feel that they shouldn't be charged for supporting their peers in their athletic endeavors. Free student admission would increase student attendance and support for athletic events, especially the smaller sporting events where students often do not go because they do not want to pay the entry fee, a fee which when charged at every sporting event adds up quickly for a high school student. We've seen these changes before on both a small and large scale, from Westwood High School to a university such as Michigan State. Michigan State allows free admission for students to all sporting events apart from football and hockey. In a world where life becomes ever more expensive as students grow up, attending a smaller sporting event should not cost more as a high school student than it will as a college student. Furthermore, the positive effects of more student engagement stemming from free admission to sporting events is profound, and we see it every year with the homecoming football game, where for the past 2 years, the game has been free, and students rallied around the team, increasing the sense of interconnectedness at MSHS. While the effects of making sporting events free would not be on the same scale as homecoming, I believe it would increase student engagement and connection, something that has been missing since our return to school after COVID-19. I also understand that the fiscal responsibility of such a move must be considered. But I hope that MAPS can find other ways to balance these costs, such as finding local business sponsorships to cover student admission or increasing adult prices. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I hope that the school board will listen to the voice of the students and enact change to make all sporting events free for MAPS students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Max Deaver?
Hello, my name is Max Deaver, and Cully and Lily have already done a pretty good job covering what I'm up here to speak about. But what I do want to talk about today is the unintended consequences of this fee that you have to pay, the students have to pay to enter the sporting events. So I know that it is there to raise funds for athletics, but I believe these unintended consequences affect certain groups of people. The biggest one, I believe, is actually student athletes. Personally, I know many student athletes, and I feel they are the quickest to say no when asked to go to other sports events simply because they can't spare the $5 or $10. Student athletes don't have the time to work a part-time job while going to school, which is the equivalent of a full-time job, have daily practices, and not to mention have time to do homework. I myself was a student athlete and tried to balance all this, but I found it near impossible and ended up giving up sports to have a job. Now, I am in a situation where paying $5 or $10 is not really a big deal, but for student athletes, $5 or $10 might be all the money in their wallet. Another group of people who are affected by this are low-income families. While I cannot personally speak for them, I know this fee is a deterrent to those who don't have the money to spare. I don't believe money should be a barrier preventing high schoolers from participating in public school events. Again, I know these consequences are unintended, but I just wanted to bring them to light. Now I ask you to let today be the day where we join other schools such as Westwood in making sporting events free and accessible to all students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. William Salo?
Hi, I'm William Salo. I'm a senior at Marquez Senior High School and part of student council. I'm the secretary. And I want to say, like they've talked about the student perspective, but the athlete perspective is also pretty huge. Like the effect of a large student body there, like supporting you while you're playing, is a lot bigger than it seems. Marquette was allowed, the soccer team, I was a part of that team this past year, and we were allowed to go to the state tournament for the first time this year in however many decades. And we were the top of our district, so we had home field for our district final against Petoskey, which was quite a thriller, I must say. We went to like overtime and 11-person shootout. It was pretty great. But one of my favorite parts of that was seeing the student attendance. It was like huge for a soccer game. But like I've been going to the soccer games my older siblings played like the past 10 years or so. And that was the most people I'd ever seen there by a long shot. Like the whole bleachers were filled up, people brought chairs. It was great attendance, and it really was a lot more motivating than you might think as an athlete to be like on the sideline, make a little move, and you actually hear the crowd just like going crazy. It feels pretty great, and it's really great as a student also to get those experiences and support your peers. So I just want to add on to what everybody else has said that I would really support if this could, you could make admissions free for all students. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to new business. Consider acceptance of bid from Prime Specialty Contracting for the MSHS boiler burner replacement.
I would make a motion to consider the acceptance of the bid from Prime Specialty Contracting for the MSHS boiler burner replacement.
I'll support.
Do we have to put the amount in or in the motion or? Okay, perfect. Okay. So motion made by Mr. Zadunik, support by Mr. Hewitt. Any further comments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Consider acceptance of bid from Elcom Systems for the radio upgrade project.
I would make a motion to accept the bid from Elcom for the radio upgrade project.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Sarka, support by Mrs. Klipp. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Accept the 2022-2023 audit report by Anderson, Tackman and Company.
I'll make the motion to accept the audit report for 2022-23 by Anderson Tackman.
Second.
All right, support, or motion made by Mr. Hewitt, support by Mr. Zadunik. Any further comments? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Consider merit pay. I don't know. What do we make a motion to accept the merit pay as presented.
I would make a motion to accept the merit pay as presented in the handout provided by administration.
I support.
I'll be abstaining from the vote.
Okay. All right, so motion made by Mr. Sarka, support by Mrs. Maddox Smith. Mr. Hewitt will be abstaining. Any further comments or questions about the merit pay? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Consider free MAPS student admissions to all MAPS district-funded athletic contests effective January 1st, 2024, excluding MHSAA tournament contests.
I'll make a motion to consider free MAP student admission to all MAPS district-funded athletic contests effective January 1st, 2024, excluding MHSAA tournament contests.
Support.
All right, motion made by Mrs. Klipp, support by Mrs. Maddox Smith. Do we have any further comments or discussion?
How do we track student attendance at those events so we can see if the promised increase in student attendance is going to be, do we track that? Do we know what kind of?
The perceived roar of the crowd when something goes well.
If we install decibel level devices at the events, can we measure that? No, I'm curious. I want to see if we do see an increase in.
Yeah, I think a lot of it would probably be based on anecdotes, on observation, but I certainly can talk to our athletic director to see if there's any metrics that could support that.
I wonder if concessions, like an increase in concessions.
It's double the prices of the concessions
Yeah.
to make up the difference.
Are you making
It's on
a
you
motion
guys
or
for
just a
that.
comment?
So
What's the first event? Do we know what the first event would be in the new year?
I believe we have a basketball game. Help me out, boys. Basketball game coming up like tomorrow or Wednesday.
But this would not be effective
Oh, right.
until
Oh,
January.
right. Yeah. Well, don't quote me on that one. Yeah. This is starting January.
And
correct.
that's just to give our staff time to get everyone up to speed as to how it's going to be done, pretty much, is why we put it off to January 1st. Plus, we also have the holidays coming up, so.
There's a lot of layers to something seemingly simple that you would never think about. We had a lengthy conversation last week that it's like an onion. You just, every time you uncover one layer, there's many more. So, but we thought a little bit of time would be helpful for our staff to respond.
And then I also want to just clarify too that it is MAPS district-funded athletic contests. So it's not all of our sports. Because there are some sports that are non-school funded, like soccer, unfortunately. So that those wouldn't be included, but most of the other sports would be. So do we have any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, now moving on to comments from the public general. What's that? Okay. We have Chad Larson.
Good evening, Chad Larson. I am the president of the Wildcat Aquatics Youth Swim Club. And today, our director met to discuss pool hours starting after December 22nd. We were informed that after December 22nd, that pool hours would be cut to 0, which is terrible timing being in the middle of the season. So we went from 6 hours a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2 hours a day, to 0. This has been a long-standing tradition of training at the Marquette Senior High School pool. I have swam with Kristen. I know some people have had swimmers on the club and been very involved. This notice comes, like I said, at a terrible time this season. We're at the halfway point. Right now, we have a swimmer that's qualified for a swim meet in Indianapolis in January. Many swimmers who have qualified for a big meet in Milwaukee in February, and a half a dozen or so have already qualified for YMCA states in March. This past summer, our club won the Division III long course states in Milwaukee. And just before COVID, we won the Division III short course. So you can see that we're not just a cut rate club. We have some very qualified swimmers. Our club is low impact. Some kids come in their swimsuits and leave in their swimsuits. There's no trash developed, so if this case is janitorial staff is told to us, I don't see that we're creating a whole lot of trash or complications for the janitorial staff in these 6 hours a week. To be community inclusive, MAP should not be restrictive to its own students. Some of these students only have swimming as their winter sport. And with this sport, it has to be in a pool, ironically. The community embraces MAPS, which is evident by the millage proposals and they pass. Monetary donations evident by the banners that display who gave the money. And the use of other facilities in the community not owned by MAPS. The Board of Education, Code 7510, says the board will permit the use of school facilities when such permission has been requested in writing by a responsible organization or a group of citizens and has been approved by the superintendent. District facilities shall be available for the below listed. F, under below listed, is community organizations or groups of individuals formed for charitable, civic, social, religious, recreational, or educational purposes. That was dated October 11th, 1999, last revised November 26, 2012. I hope this decision can be reversed through good communication with the board and the superintendent, as 7510 explains. That's a decision between the two of you. It would be a travesty to have to tell all these swimmers their season's over December 22nd, and everything that they've been working for, their goals that they're looking forward to, will be crushed. I sent everybody an email today with a letter attached, a little bit more in depth. I can remember back to 1982. That's where my memory starts with the Marquette Senior High School pool. And I don't want to see that end for anybody at any age level or where they are with their swimming career. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew Lutenberger.
I'm here to talk about the rebranding, the Redmond moniker, and your decision to rename. I guess, give you a little background. I live right across the street. I don't have any kids. I've never been in this school. Literally last month, 6 weeks ago, was the first time I found out that you guys had a library up here. So I'm not a frequent flyer of this program, and frankly, you can ignore me because of that. I will say, though, there's only 3 colors on the school everything. So one of them's red, the other one's black, the other one's white. So black and white, they're just too plain, can't use that. Red is a good name. I went to college up here in the 90s, and I was introduced, as a city folk, I was introduced to the whole Chief Kabagam. And MAPS went through the whole discussion about, should we keep the, quote, Indian head? And I want to say this, anybody who says it's the Indian head, really doesn't know our town. That's Chief Caboggum. I'm actually annoyed we have something called Presque Isle Park and not Chief Caboggum Park or Caboggum Point or anything like that. It's a way to whitewash a history. So to get beyond that, I don't really think of Redmond as a racial term. And I would hope the school board and those in charge would not think of it as a racial term. And we can do rebranding, which would be, we can redesign and redefine what it means to be a Redmond. I would say anybody who comes to Marquette is a Redmond. Be true to your school. Be a Redmond. All of that, though, gets to the point of you've got to define it. And I want to say that these little tiny taconite pellets that we hear the trains rolling down the hills every single day, 15 times a day, those are the Redettes. And we've produced skyscrapers all around the world. We've produced railroad tracks. We've produced cars. I bet right now if you drive home in a Subaru, you're driving one of our loads of iron ore that made it into your vehicles. You drive a Ford, their engines, some of their F-150 engines are built with our iron. Ours, this one right down here. So those are the Redettes that make our world work. We should be proud of that. We should rename it that way. The Redmen are the ones who melt that down and make it happen. And if you really want to go to gender, which I don't like the gender aspect of it, but if you want to say Redmen, those are the adults. Those are the 9th grade to 12th grade. You've graduated to become a Redman. Anything below K through 8, that can be a Redette. We can easily make that a way to define our terms so that they're not racist, so that anybody who claims that we are being racist, we can point to them and say, you know, we had an actual Chief Caboggum who saw the iron ore, saw the sandstone. We built St. Peter's Cathedral out of the iron and the sand that comes from our town. It wasn't imported. Those are the Redmen who built that cathedral. These are the Redettes that make that happen. Be proud of that. And I say it simply because my favorite color is not red. And I have to admit, green is my favorite color, so I don't know if you're going to change the color of the community. But I've come to terms with the big red M that I look at every single day outside my window. I have to accept it. But it's a personal choice then to say, what does Redmond mean to me? And I haven't heard any one of you ask us that. And honestly, I was hoping for more of a consultant group to have these discussions, because it's taken 6 weeks for me to go from walking in here to being able to speak. And it's gone 3 months for me to go, oh wait, I need that day off. Like right now I should be at work. But I decided not to because this was important to me. So please consider or reconsider the renaming and just stick with rebranding. You can do a whole lot of good. You can present a whole lot of alternative thoughts. And I really have to end with this because that's kind of what I want to stick with is you've got Redettes, the taconite pellets that make this world happen. We can be proud of that. The Redmen are the people who make those things actually physical, brought to life. Now, if you're going to change the name to the Mariners, I want to really stop you there because that's an 8th grade biology like moniker, and please don't become that. But the Redmen and the Redettes are a very valid name for our community. Please consider that you can keep those names and those monikers because we don't have a mascot. Each one of us could be that mascot. The face of the Redmen could be everyone in this room. The face of a Redette could be every one of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to board member comments. We'll start with Mrs. Maddox-Smith.
I just want to thank everybody for being here today. Thank you for taking the time to come here and speak to us. It takes a lot of courage to get up there, especially our young people that came today. And we're here for you guys, so it's really good to hear your voice and hear your opinion, so thank you. And to the gentleman that took time off work, thank you for being here and sharing your opinion. We really are listening and we hear you. And to all the board members that I work with, I know you all are putting a lot of time in, our superintendent and our assistant superintendent, thank you all.
Mr. Zdunek.
I'm just happy that we were able to extend the free admissions to our students. I think that's great. I'm also encouraged by the conversation that we had last week about our current pay-to-play policy. Look forward to offering some clarification on that soon. I want to thank our administration team for their time to ensure we have a good mechanism in place to address this moving forward. And thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight.
Mrs. Klipp?
Just a thank you to the amount of documentation, reporting, the speakers we had this evening regarding the infrastructure issues and the audit and merit pay. That is a result of dozens and dozens and dozens of hours. So appreciate its succinctity and its information. Thank you, of course, to the administration. Happy that we can give our staff and faculty merit pay, and congratulations to our young people who spoke. I love it when young people come in front of us because it's very easy at times to forget in all of the conversation of wading through files and wading through data and wading through emails and who we serve, and we serve you. So get your friends and show up more. It's fun to hear from you. And again, thank you to everybody who spoke. A lot to think about. Appreciate your time and courage speaking in front of us. You're valued.
Ms. Ray?
Just kind of want to state that as I have now been on the board for almost 3 years, that it's a real pleasure to see how this board functions and the community that comes out to speak on particular issues, and I really appreciate that. It's been, I've watched this board grow, and the communication and the community being committed to coming out, and especially the youth. Really appreciate that. I think there's so much value to having students at these events, and you all expressed all of the various reasons why, and that's really important. And I appreciate Jason bringing all of this to the table. I think these things are what we're here for, to reflect on, and to we don't always know all the issues that are out there until someone brings it to the table, and then for people to speak out on it and so forth. And I really appreciate everybody who's come and spoken tonight. It's not easy getting up there, I know. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Hewitt?
No additional comments. Thanks.
Mr. Sarka?
Thank you. Just as a lesson to the students, if you're going to do a presentation about a new boiler, do it on the coldest darn day of the year. That's always a good way to set up what you're going to talk about. It's a week that we think about what we're thankful for. And just to echo what the other board members have said, thankful for the board we have, and I think our committee of the whole has been really working well to kind of bring up issues that may not have been advanced before, and I think that's been really good, and I thank our board president for really making the push for that. Certainly our administration is doing a great job. Also this last week, I think the district as a whole, certainly the board and members of the board, lost a friend. And I think, somebody who really supported the district, and it's worth remembering people that do that and then pass on as well. Other than that, I'm good. Thank you.
Student reps, do you have anything to add? No? Okay. All right, board president comments. Just thank everybody for coming out. I think that this will be a great addition for our students to be able to attend sporting events, and it's nice that it finally happened. I think it'll be great for the students to get out and support each other. So make sure that you get people out to do that now. Just thankful for everyone for coming out, and that's it. Let's see here. Announcements and other meetings. December 1st, PD half PD Day, half day for students. December 4th, Committee of the Whole here in the library at 5:30. December 4th, all Bothwell and High School Orchestra Winter Concert at Kaufman Auditorium at 6:30. December 5th, the Bothwell Band Winter Concert at Kaufman at 6:30. December 6th, the High School MSHS Band Winter Concert at Kaufman at 6:30. December 11th, 2023, the MSHS Choral Winter Concert at Kaufman at 6:30. And December 18th, board meeting here in the library at 5:30. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Hewitt, support by Mr. Zedunick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Mr. Sark is opposed. Motion passes.